Recording live from the virtual Lucky Number 7 Lounge, this is Dine, Drink Vegas, the podcast by and for everybody stuck at home, but wishing they were in the land of neon lights and bad decisions. My name's John, also known as the baller of the budget, and today you have found episode number 37, the Lowdown on Rooftop Drinking. Also, we're going to get into the drink of the day, and of course, bring you those Las Vegas news stories that we thought were interesting. But before we could do any of that, we've got to welcome in the founder of Dine, Drink Travel and Dine, Drink Vegas, the high roller formerly of the High Plains, the king of comps, the leader in the luxury lounge, the Alabama slammer, the man who will soon be waiting on the limo to take him to, by my count, 3 different luxury resorts. Of course, I can only be talking about Bill. Bill, how in the world are you today?
I am fantastic, John, although I'm deeply curious about this drink of the day. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, and this is one of my favorites. So I know sometimes I ask you to make a drink that I worry won't be up your alley, but this one is up mine.
I was going to say something unkind, but I've never said something unkind to you on this podcast before. So
I did tee up an up yours joke. I really did. I thought you'd take the bait.
But we're
look at you being classy,
John, and that's not what we do.
So the drink of the day today, Bill, because I know you are a huge fan of the old fashioned, is a variant of the old fashioned. This is the Sazerac. It's often called the official cocktail of the city of New Orleans, which is not Las Vegas, but it's hot and there's a lot of gambling and really good food. So, other than the humidity, close enough. The Sazerac originates from the Sazerac Hotel in New Orleans. It was originally made with Sazerac rye whiskey, which is still around to this day. Sazerac is the distilling company that owns Buffalo Trace out of Kentucky, and Buffalo Trace makes many of the bourbons you and I both enjoy. So let me give you how this drink breaks down. Now, again, I'm going to remind listeners, the old-fashioned formula is this: 1.5 to 2 ounces of any spirit you want. Whiskey is typical, but you can literally make an old-fashioned out of any distilled spirit you want. Some degree of sweetness, sugar cubes, simple syrup, some degree of bitters, all of that served on a big ice cube and stirred, and then normally garnished with some type of fruit. Might be an orange peel, might be a lemon peel, might be cherries. Your call. That is the basics of the old-fashioned. So, Bill, you are a big fan of an old-fashioned. Would you like to run us through what makes the Sazerac unique?
So there are a couple of things which make the Sazerac unique. One of them is the absinthe that the recipe calls for. Now, I don't have absinthe because it's really hard to find here in Alabama. But at your suggestion, what I did was just rinse a glass, put some star anise in a glass with a little bit of vodka, diluted that with some water, let it sit for a while, rinsed around for a while, and I got to a very similar spot. It turns out I just don't like the flavor of star anise. So
yeah,
I know that makes it different. The other thing is that, of course, you can make an old-fashioned with rye, but I tend to make my old fashions with bourbon, and a lot of times I'll do it with a wheat bourbon rather than a high rye bourbon. So I like kind of that softer flavor profile, but the rye and the absinthe are really the differences. Now, the fact that the recipe calls for Peychaud's bitters, I mean, it's a little specific, and sure, those bitters taste different. I don't think that's all that big of a difference. So I can absolutely see how it's similar, but there are a couple little twists that make it different. So do you like this more than an old fashioned, or is it simply a different thing for you?
So, I mean, again, I do consider this an old fashioned, but I like this particular combination. I went with Sazerac rye because that's the originator, and it happens to legitimately be one of my favorite rye whiskeys. There's a lot of trendier, newer, high-end ryes on the market. I tend to gravitate towards old school stuff. I like Sazerac. I like Wild Turkey's 101 proof rye.
Which is what I did.
With that. Yeah, most of us are familiar with the bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they make a rye. I'm a fan of Old Overholt rye, which I think might be more approachable for you because it's not a very intense rye flavor. But I went with that, and I went with a little bit of absinthe, just a few spritzes out of a Mister bottle. And then the big thing is with the Sazerac, you're going to do a lemon peel, not an orange peel, not a cherry. What you want with the herbs of the absinthe, and my little trick with the star anise, it gets you in the ballpark, but it lacks some of the other herbal notes. And I feel like maybe I'm steering you the wrong way. Maybe we need to go down the road of trying you with Benedictine and a little hint of star anise, but some Benedictine, because that would help you get some of the things that an absinthe would have. The just vodka and star anise won't. But I know that's not your favorite flavor anyway. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. This is a nice variant on the old fashioned. I wouldn't say I make these very often. On the other hand, the only reason I haven't made one in a while is because my bottle of Peychaud's bitters was empty, and I had one of the large bottles of Peychaud's, and I used it all up. So that means I must make a fair amount of these, because sometimes a bottle of bitters lasts forever.
It doesn't necessarily mean you made a lot, because you put like gallons of bitters in every drink that you make, right? So you might have had like a cocktail.
No, I mean, I shake more bitters than the recipe calls for. This one calls for 3 dashes. I did 5, so I didn't go crazy. But I am a little heavy-handed with the bitters. So, yeah. Bill, other than the star anise, do you feel like there's a drink here you could like if we took out that licoricey note?
So, absolutely. My preference is always going to be to go for a more wheated whiskey, and right. More wheat and less rye and whatever whiskey. Okay. But I don't hate this. I mean, so listeners, if you're new to the podcast somewhere, I want to say it was about episode 11, give or take, we made the single worst drink I've ever had, the infamous Smurf Barf. This is nowhere near Smurf Barf territory, right? Like, it's fine. I'm going to drink it. I'm going to enjoy it. And you can see this on the video, but our listeners cannot. I have right next to it made myself a traditional old-fashioned, which is what's going to get me through the end of this episode after I finish the Sazerac. I will say that as ryes go, that the Wild Turkey 101 rye isn't bad, right? Yeah. Like, it's more rye than I would prefer, but whatever. It tastes to me very similar to their bourbon. Right? Like, essentially a few steps down the same road. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just more rye and less corn, basically. Yeah. So, yeah, it still tastes like Wild Turkey, which I happen to think is a good thing. I know there's some people who were probably traumatized by plastic bottles of Wild Turkey in their youth, but, get over that. It's actually really, really, really good whiskey. All right, Bill. So I think we've kind of beat the Sazerac horse to death. I will tell listeners for future drinks of the day, last year we threatened the tiki of summer, and Bill hated that idea so much. He quit his job and moved halfway across the country and put the podcast into hiatus. But Bill, there is no escaping. The tiki is coming for you. So listeners can expect in the coming episodes, we will be jumping into to tiki drinks, or at least things that are tiki adjacent. We may have to get creative because Alabama makes sourcing certain ingredients tough on Bill. So we may go off-roading and make our own tiki-inspired things based on what we can get into Bill's liquor cabinet. And at some point, we'll get to our pool preview for the year. But since we're talking about warm weather, we're going to dive into one of Bill's favorite topics, because this is the right time of year for rooftop bars, the kind of thing you don't want to do in January in Vegas because it's too dang cold, and it's not always fun in July, at least not before about 9:30 at night. So, Bill, this is kind of your baby. We're going to do this interview style. Why don't you start with, because we spend a lot of time talking about the Strip on this podcast, but let's start downtown. What do you got for downtown rooftop bars?
So I've got 2 downtown. And for those of you who are familiar with Vegas and know that there's really only one rooftop bar, hear me out. But the Legacy Club on top of Circa is gorgeous. And
Yes.
depending on when you're there, you can actually get a table for a fairly reasonable price or a fairly reasonable spend minimum. The reason that I'm not talking about what the prices are for any of these is that it's so wildly variable depending on the day of the week, whether there's a special event, the time of the day. Like it's too many. There's too many variables. But it
Yeah.
was it's fine, and the views up there are amazing. I love the fire pits they have up there. I remember we went up there with a guys group one year, and it whatever we all had a phenomenal time. I think my brother-in-law Mark, God rest his soul,
Yes.
was there with us. Also, I've got a soft spot for the Legacy Club because it's one of the best performing videos on my YouTube channel. But the Legacy Club is absolutely gorgeous. Do know that if you want outdoor space there, I would probably reserve it in advance. And if you're a big group, I would absolutely reserve that in advance. If you're just one or two people and you want to see some pretty views, most of the time there's a half decent chance that they're going to be able to go ahead and sit you at the bar. The second spot downtown that I love, which isn't technically a rooftop bar, but this is a hill I'm willing to fight on. The Top of Binion's Steakhouse actually has one of my favorite bars in Las Vegas. It's a nice bar. Like the bartender is friendly. They got a pretty good selection. The prices won't crush your soul. You can eat a full meal if you care to, or I'm pretty sure they'll let you go up there and just drink. I know I've seen them do it, and the
Yep.
views from Binion's are also phenomenal. So yeah, so there's only properly one rooftop bar which downtown, which is Legacy Club at Circa, which is great. But I wouldn't count off Top of Binion's, the steakhouse. Now, that's not where you're going to go because there's a group of 8 of you and you're going to get rowdy drinking. But if it's a small group or if it's just you or if you want to eat dinner, the views absolutely make it mean it's a place that's worth including in this conversation. By the way, listeners, if you do go to Top of Binion's, go to the elevator which is inside the casino both of the elevators are inside the casino, but they used to have this horrible like glass door contraption. It's been closed the last couple of years. They're theoretically trying to repair it, but if you see a sign about glass elevator up to the Top of Binion's, don't take that. That's absolutely terrifying and nothing good happens if you take that. Take just the regular boring indoor elevators.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about Top of Binions is you're on that hotel tower that is no longer being used. It has the reputation as the most haunted place in Las Vegas. Maybe in October we'll do an episode about that. I've actually thought about spending a night at the Hotel Apache because they have ghost hunting things and all of that. Well, maybe somewhere down the road we'll get there. I will say we talked about, I think the last episode or the episode before, the Plaza announced they're going to do their Friday fireworks again. If you happen to be in town on a Friday night and you can afford the Legacy Club, getting a reservation of an outside space during that fireworks show, I'm thinking that's got to be amazing.
No, that would be so. That's excellent money to spend. And let's say you've got I don't know. I'm taking a stab at this, listeners. I don't know. I am making this up. But let's say you've got a $500 minimum spend or something, right? If you've got a group of 4 or 5 of you, I mean, the drinks are going to be $20 or $30 a piece anyway. And face it, you've lost more than $100 or $200 in a bad gambling run in Vegas anyway. Go get some cocktails and a beautiful evening and enjoy yourselves. I'd do that in a heartbeat.
It is a little bit luxurious, and it's not normally my thing. I try to be the baller on a budget, but I've been up there in a group with you. Got to say, it's a gorgeous space. So, Bill, you brought up that your 2 places downtown, only one was actually open air. The other one, Binion's. Great view, but it's not open to the air. So let's talk about what other spots have you been to that you recommend that actually are open air?
So, in addition to Legacy Club, one of my favorite spots is Skyfall, which is on top of the W, which used to be the Delano. And I've got some video of it up on the YouTube channel if you want to see it. But it's just kind of a nice space, and it's a mostly indoor space, but they have a small outdoor patio there. You do have to, if you're going to try to sit outdoors, you absolutely need to reserve one of those tables because there's not many of them. But Skyfall, is great. One of the other reasons I like Skyfall is because it's right next to Revea, which is an incredible French restaurant that just won't kill the wallet in quite the same way that, say, Le Cirque will. Revea also has a lot of outdoor seating. But other than that, most of these spots are indoors, which, I don't know, to me feels like a missed opportunity. Now, there's a place at the Palms called Ghost Bar that I haven't been able to go to yet. It's got outdoor seating, but I get why most of the rooftop bars are either entirely or mostly indoors. Because, drinking in rooftops may not be the perfect combination of the things, right? And it's not like they've got guards posted all around the edges or anything like that. And it is perfectly safe, right? Like they've got, all of them will have raised glass walls and stuff like that. But still, I can see where somebody might do something kind of dumb. But yeah, there's only 2 of them that I've been to that have open air patios, in addition to Revea, which is right next door, which has open air. And then there's Ghost Bar, which I want to check out. So, John, you talked about it before. It's highly weather dependent. But like I know my wife, anytime the weather is right, absolutely wants to eat outdoors or drink outdoors or whatever. In your hometown, there's a beer garden that has outdoor patio seating. Do you care much if you're sitting indoors or outdoors when you're having your drinks?
It really does depend on weather conditions and things like that. I don't want to melt away under the West Texas sun or the Nevada sun. So if it's unrelentlessly hot and there's no mister system and no shade, yeah, I'm done. But if the especially at night when in Vegas, it could still be 99 at night, but 99 without the sun beating down is very different than 115 with the sun beating down. And I like dry, hot desert air. I'm a child of the desert anyway. So I do like outdoor dining and drinking when when Mother Nature cooperates. Especially, I like Vegas over West Texas because here in our neck of the woods, we are not in the desert, we're in the sub-desert, and we are not that far from several other parts of the state that are not even sub-desert. They're dry, but they're not desert, which means bugs can be an issue. We are also, because we're, where the Great Plains dumps down through the Edwards Plateau on its way into the mountains and basins, we have a lot of wind and dirt and unpleasant things that come through. So I tend to like outdoor things in Vegas more than I like them at home. But yeah, all else being equal, when the weather conditions are right, yeah, I love being outdoors.
No, and I get your complaints about how bad the wind is, because like here in Alabama this spring, every day the wind has been 2, maybe 3 miles an hour. One day it almost cracked 80 degrees, and one day it got down to 70. So yeah, I understand you about the weather being brutal where you are.
Yeah, well, the reason it's not windy in Alabama is the air is thick and humid, and God doesn't want to move it. Okay, I will take dry and windy over living in molasses air. I have done deep south humidity. No thanks.
Awesome. So there's a couple of spots too I haven't tried yet that I want to go to.
Yeah, because you talked about Ghost Bar. What else?
Yeah, so Ghost Bar is one. The other one is Foundation Room, which is on top of Mandalay Bay, which I keep meaning to go to, and for reasons I keep not. So I'm going on a trip to Vegas next month, and I could check one out, but I've got a different question, John. Do either of those places appeal to you as a place to take our group of guys that's going on the Labor Day trip?
Well, we'll be right there. Everybody on our trip is either staying inside Mandalay / the W or next door at Luxor. So Foundation Room appeals because it's right there. But with our group of guys, I would think that cigar-friendly terrace at the Palms. Although, we're all aging, and Ghost Bar at one point at least was the hippest bar in Vegas. We are a decidedly non-hip bunch of dudes, and I could put on the right outfit and fake being guy that used to be hip. I wasn't, but I can fake it. Most of our group can't even fake having once been hip. I mean, we look more like a group that needs new hips than a hip group.
I,
So
I've
I'm
hit
not
that
sure if Ghost
glorious.
Bar's for us or not.
I have hit that glorious spot in life, though, where most of the pretty girls at the bar assume that I'm just one of their dad's friends. Um, and whatever. I will pretend for like 2 minutes before one of you punches me and reminds me that I'm married. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And then I go
Yeah.
back and have my cocktail. I'm not yet in hip replacement territory, although sure, I can see it from where I am.
Yeah, we could see it from where we are. And I will say, if the pretty young girls in Vegas notice us, it's because they have professional reasons to notice us. And we're not those guys, mostly because neither one of us wants to give our wives any excuse to divorce us. So that's not going to work out well for anybody.
So fun side
We're bad for
story.
business.
Fun side story about one such interaction. I was going through the Horseshoe Hotel, innocently minding my own business, and there's a real pretty, like I was going up to my room, there's a real pretty girl who stops me like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm not thinking anything of it yet, right? I'm just like, oh, I'm going up to my room. She says, alone? And I figure out what's going on. I'm like, yes. And then
Yeah.
I just take off on this full scale run because nothing that was going to happen after that point in the conversation was going to make my day any better.
So I had a similar interaction. The last time we did the guys trip, I guess this is 2 or 3 years back, in the same hotel complex. You guys were at the Delano, I was at Luxor, and I was on the second floor of the Luxor Pyramid. And so I've made my way back over. We've been playing shoot to roll bubble craps with Zero for, I don't know, 20 hours straight. And we had just finished our last drink, and I walked back over across. And I forgot, because you come out on the second floor, and I forgot. So I went downstairs and realized I don't need to be downstairs. But we'd had quite a day in Vegas, and I was in a certain condition where I was having a little trouble navigating the pyramid. And this very attractive young lady walks up to me, and she goes, "You look like you could use some company." And I just giggled really loud and went, nope. And I kept walking. I didn't run. And I will say, like, you know, she was very attractive, which I'm sure means she was also very expensive. But I'm a happily married man, and I don't think I would have had the money. But even if I did, I wasn't spending it that way. But there were a lot of guys in the place, so I guess. I guess I should be flattered that I look like I might have some money and not be entirely gross. I don't know.
One last story, then I want to get back to rooftop bars, but it's consistent because it talks about prostitutes and casinos. So one time I spent a weekend in Lagos, Nigeria. Don't ask me, it's a long story. But I spent a weekend in Lagos, Nigeria, and I thought it might be a good idea to go to the casino at the bottom of that hotel. And I putz around, and I quickly figure out that it's not open yet, like all the slot machines are off. There's this really pretty woman who walks up to me and starts talking, and I quickly figure out what that conversation was. So, I'm trying to be polite, but I start leaving, I start walking, and she keeps following me. And I start walking faster, and she keeps following me. Then at some point, I'm literally running through the hotel lobby, and she's like, "What's the matter? Are you scared?" At which point I lean back over my shoulder and yell, "Yes." And my boss, actually it was my boss's boss, was sitting in the lobby, and this dude had so many assignments in Nigeria you couldn't count. He just laughed at me the whole time, right? But I'm like, yeah, no, I'm out. But maybe we should return to the productive point of this podcast before our listeners think that we're even worse people than we actually are.
No, I think they probably just think we're puritanical rubes who, we talk on here about there's a lot of things people go to Vegas for that you and I don't. And we want to run a good travel podcast about Las Vegas. And listeners, please hear us. If you are there for adult entertainment purposes, we are not judging you. We just ain't them dudes. There's too much Hank Hill in the both of us, okay? Neither of us cooks with propane. Other than that, we understand Hank Hill. All right, Bill, I'm going to do these two questions in reverse order. With the ones you've been to, and there's several you haven't been to yet. By the way, there's even more off-strip in other places. But with the ones you've been to, and I'll let you do both questions, but let's start with, is there one you found to be overrated? Maybe prices were too high or the view wasn't that great. And of the ones you've been to, which one do you most want to get back to and do again?
All right, so talking about overrated ones. And to be clear, none of these places are bad, and I'm going to try to describe them as accurately as I can. So if it's the right space for any one of our listeners, they can go. But Alley 66 on top of Resorts World, so it's further up the strip. The views aren't quite as good as some of the spots in the middle of the strip. The other thing is, I don't know, I just got generally the vibe at Alley Lounge on 66, on the 66th floor of whichever tower that is in Resorts World, that they were appealing to a way younger crowd than I am. Now, if you're in your 20s or maybe your early 30s, cool, they're there for you. But if you are, let's say, 20 years more distinguished than that, I don't know, I got the vibe they were looking for a different customer than me. Now, to be clear, the drinks were great, the views were great, the service was lovely. It just, whatever. It's not that it was bad. It wasn't. It was that it was overrated. Also, and John, I'm going to make you laugh with this one because it goes against all of my leader in the luxury lounge tendencies, but Sky Bar in the Waldorf Astoria is overrated. It's beautiful, but it's just one more expensive hotel bar. Now, again, the views are phenomenal. If you have a chance to, if you're in the neighborhood and you go up for like a drink because you want to take in the views, cool. If you want to spend an evening drinking, yeah, I don't know that I would. At the time I was there a couple years ago, they had a sushi bar. That looked fine. I got like a couple of snacks from somewhere. But it's just, I don't know, it was kind of a soulless, expensive hotel bar. The only thing it had going for it was the views. So, yeah, Sky Bar in the Waldorf Astoria and all Alley 66 up at Resorts World, good experiences, just overrated. If I'm going to pay 25 or 30 bucks for a cocktail, I guess I wanted something else. But in terms of places I really want to go back to, Skyfall, that one that was at the point I went there on top of the Delano and is now it's on top of the W, but still under the same name. I'm a huge fan of Skyfall, partially because it's next to Revea, and you've got an excellent chance to make an evening of dinner in one place and, then drinks before or after in another, and it's really convenient. They have some nice touches like the custom-made ice cubes with their logo and all that sort of stuff. But this should tell you something about the kind of space that Skyfall is, John. I talked to the bartender for like 45 minutes, and I don't talk to strangers in bars. Nope. Like I took the stranger
do, but you don't.
No, yeah. Right? Like I go with you. I'm like, John, will you please shut up so we can finish our conversation? No, like it was a warm, friendly place. And there were absolutely people in there who were 25 years younger than I am. Not much more than that, because that would start to get illegal. But there were absolutely younger people in there. But it just seemed like it was a place where it was more okay for a person of a more distinguished career stage to also be. Yeah. I really like Skyfall.
Okay, well that sounds really good to me.
Yeah. Well, and do you? So let's step away from rooftops for a second, because I know this is less your spot. Actually, you know what? No, let's do this different. Have you been to any rooftop bars that you like? Because you're the baller on a budget. You've got a different approach to this sort of thing that I do, and all of the places I've talked about are kind of expensive even for Vegas, right? Like we're talking $25 or $30 cocktail sorts of places. What's the baller on a budget approach to a rooftop bar, John?
So if you want to do one of these super premium ones, because sometimes baller on a budget means we are going to do the baller thing, but we're going to look for the breaks. If you're going on weeknights, if you're traveling on Monday through Thursday, and you want to hit these places, some of them will be dark on Monday or Tuesday. That's not that unusual in Vegas. But if you want to hit one of these super luxury places, try to travel when it's not a weekend and when there's not some crazy crowded conference in town. That's one way to do it. There's a couple other ways to get your view on a budget. One I would recommend is the Happy Half Hour Bar on the Link High Roller. Now, you only get a 30-minute experience, and I am not claiming it is cheap. Tickets, you're probably going to pay somewhere in the ballpark of $100, maybe more, maybe less, depending on what peak pricing is looking like in Vegas. You only get 30 minutes. It's not going to be super premium spirits, but for the view you get and the experience, that is absolutely worth it. It is a premium experience that is affordable. So you can look for ways to do that. Now let's talk about some true budget options. Number one I would recommend is BrewDog. So I believe it's 7 stories up. So not nearly as vaulted a view as some of these others that are on floor 30 or above, some of them way above. You're only on the 7th floor, I believe, of the building there with BrewDog Brewing. And I'm not saying their drinks are cheap. You're on the Vegas Strip, so you're going to be paying $20 to $30 a drink. But there's not going to be a big nasty cover charge. There are going to be some cheaper options like a pint of beer. It is a BrewDog establishment. After all, they brew on premises. And it's a more casual atmosphere. So sometimes for a baller on a budget, it's not just about how much money you're going to pay for the experience. Did I need to pack a nice outfit? Because Vegas being Vegas, most places will let you in. They don't enforce their dress code. But listeners, listen. If you're going to be that person that wants to wear the tacky t-shirt and the shorts and the flip-flops because that's comfortable for you, I'm not judging you. Please do not go to the Legacy Club looking like this, even if you can get them to let you in the door, right?
Which I don't think you probably can most of the time.
Most of these places will enforce dress code. Some of them may not, but respect the baller end of baller on a budget. You don't want to be that person. Places like BrewDog are fine if you're more casual. They're not looking for you to meet dress code. That's an option for an elevated view. Couple other outdoor rooftop experiences that aren't going to give you the city watching view, but it'll give you a people watching view. One of the classics is Beer Park. Now, the selection of beer there is pretty crummy. It's a Budweiser themed bar. There are some imports and craft beers, but it's all owned by InBev. But you've got a great view of the Strip. You're across the street from the fountains. That's a really good option. And then if you really want to economize, there are places in Vegas. The new mall that's being built that's replacing the old Hawaiian Mall, they're going to have food and beverage venues that go up to 3 floors where you could stand there and watch things go by. There are parking garages you can get to the top floor of. Downtown, you can go to the pool deck at the plaza and stare straight down Fremont Street, which is nice. So you can get elevated, whiskey liquor up bar, at Binion's, or is that Four Queens?
Yes.
That's Four Queens. Four Queens. My bad.
No,
Sorry,
yeah.
Four Queens. There are some places where you can get an elevated view for people watching. It's not the same as the experience Bill is talking about, but if you don't have the budget for the $25 to $35 cocktails, but you still want to get up off the ground floor, and maybe you're doing more people watching than you are skyline watching, there's definitely some things to be had out there in Vegas.
So let me ask you before, and we need to move on and talk about news, but I'd like to ask you one last question. So given the prices that the Link High Roller charges and the limited amount of time you've got, the fact that it's all pretty pedestrian alcohol, like we're talking Jack Daniels at the high end sort of thing, why would you rather do that than go to one of the spaces I mentioned and have 3-ish cocktails that are high-end liquor that you're not rushed to drink?
So part of it depends on what experience you're looking for. So again, if you're willing to dress a little bit nicer and have that more refined experience, then absolutely do that. But for those people who don't want to dress up, or you want to have a party atmosphere, but you don't want to be, you were talking about LA 66 being too young. So if you're a middle-aged or older party animal, but you want to control the crowd, get on that bar cart with 6 to 8 friends and have your own party. It'll work out real well. But again, it boils down to you won't save a ton of money by comparison, but it might be the right thing depending on how you like to travel. Not everybody wants to bring slacks and a nicer shirt when they travel to Vegas. And I like to go both ways. I have my days I want to be more casual, and I generally, you and I both dress nicer than the average tourist in Vegas, but sometimes I want to lean more to the casual side. There's definitely options out there for that. The Link High Roller is one of them.
All right, great. Well, John, what's going on in Las Vegas news?
Well, let's start with stories we steal from Scott at Vital Vegas, because after all, that's,
That's what we do.
It's what every podcaster does, whether they admit it or not. We're just honest. So, Scott, if you're listening, thanks for doing what you do. All right. So we're going to start with two more loop stations opening up, one at the Encore and one at the Link. So we've got even more connectivity there on the North Strip. And we talked about that, I think, 2 episodes ago now. But Scott also said that they're making big progress on the Virgin Casino loop station, and they're going to put one in at the Thomas and Mack Center at UNLV. Now, the data point there is the Thomas and Mack Center is 2,500 feet. We're talking a 3-minute walk from the airport, meaning that within the next calendar year, you'll be able to walk out of the airport, and faster than you can get in the taxi line or get in the rideshare line, you can go hop in a Tesla, go through the loop, and come out somewhere on the north end of the Strip, whether you're staying at Encore and Wynn, whether you're staying at Fontainebleau, we've talked Resorts World, we've talked about those options. And the thing about the Westgate stop is it's directly underneath their monorail station, meaning that conceivably you could take a loop up to Westgate, hop on the monorail, and go as far south as MGM Grand. Now, you've gone a long way out of your way, but if you're looking for that budget travel that's not a taxi, not a cab, not the bus, that really does start to open up other options from the airport to the Strip. So, Bill, we talked about this a little bit. Does getting a loop stop closer to the airport do anything for you?
So, actually, yeah, it does. I love having the limo pick me up from the airport, but a limo is kind of a pain in the butt going back to the airport because you got to schedule it for a specific time, and this will make it easier to go. The other thing is, as they continue to develop the loop, it'll let me get to more spaces on the North Strip, which will make the North Strip a better option, and I love that. The other thing is that when the North Strip is a better option, then prices on the South and Mid Strip should drop because they've got better competition, and I love that too. So no, I love everything about this.
Yeah, and I will say too, speaking of prices, I didn't include this news yet, but there are some data points coming out showing that tourism is down in Vegas. So we're not going to dive into that on this episode, but I'm glad you brought that up as a reminder. When we plan the next episode, we should have all the data for Q1 for 2025 in, and some early indicators as we're cruising our way through Q2. I think we might be able to check some market trends to see what's happening with pricing. But yeah, I agree that I think the north end of the Strip right now is a little overpriced, looking at what Fontainebleau and Resorts World in particular have going on. But anything that opens up transit all around puts downward pricing pressure on these resorts. So yeah, I agree with you in that regard. So let's jump into this one too, Bill. Scott says that Click Bar at Cosmo is going to close for some remodeling through the fall. Cosmo, now neither of us have stayed there. My wife and I have stayed at Vidara twice, which gives you really easy access to everything at Cosmo. Bill, have you ever had a drink at a Click Bar? And if not, are you looking forward to checking it out once the remodel is open?
I didn't know it was a place that exists. I've made many dozens of trips, and I didn't know it was a place that exists. Now, I've stopped in Cosmo, oddly, usually with our friend Derek. Derek's usually the one I'm drinking with when I'm in Cosmo. I have no idea what the name of any of the bars there are. I'm just like, ooh, it looks like they will sell me whiskey, and then I stop.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's where the group of friends is going, cool, I'm in. But, no, I'm not all that interested in. What I'm a little more interested in is this next story that you've got on the run sheet. What can you tell me about Daphne's Cocktail Lounge?
So the downtown cocktail room, which is one of those spaces that has gone defunct in the aftermath of Tony Hsieh's passing, and his estate is not being quite as generous with the leasing terms with tenants as he was when he was alive. It was a long time place there. It'd been there for a while. People feared that there wouldn't be another bar in there. It's sort of a bar within a bar, and the larger business, because it's not on Fremont. It's towards the back of the building. But if you think about that strip center there across from a hotel, from the El Cortez, where La Tie is and where the Griffin is, there's all these bars and clubs. Ice Cream for Ice Cream is there. There's all these bars and clubs right there. The Downtown Cocktail Lounge was in the back there. I don't know if you've ever been in there, Bill. My wife and I went in there one time. Really nice bar. Very casual feel, but very high-end cocktails, but with a downtown pricing structure. So it wasn't a cheap place to drink, but sort of like Oak and Ivy, it was a very elevated place to drink, and it was cheaper than the same drinks on the strip. So Daphne Cocktail Lounge looks to be trying to maintain that legacy with new ownership and a new theme and a new name. But it looks like, from what Scott wrote, that they're going to try to carry on that same vision of giving you an elevated cocktail experience downtown that is going to cost more than, say, buying a Jack and Coke at Whiskey Liquor Up, but isn't going to cost you what you would pay for the same type of high-end beverages on the strip.
So I'm intrigued by both Click at Cosmo and by Daphne's Cocktail Lounge, but between the two, I'm not going to lie, I'm more interested in Daphne's Cocktail Lounge, partially because if I'm in Vegas and I want some liquor to maintain a buzz, I'm not going to Whiskey Liquor Up anyway. I've probably got my room bourbon, right? Like, that's probably what I'm going with. If I'm in a bar, I want to sit and relax, enjoy the experience, and have a nice cocktail. And I don't know, I like the vibe of some of those spots downtown. And as you pointed out, that I guarantee you a cocktail at Daphne's is going to cost at least $5 less than one at Click, and probably more like $10 less. Yeah. So yeah, that's what's got my attention.
Well, I think it's the same thing we love about Oak and Ivy, which I think both of us have said is our favorite bar in Vegas, because it really is. Look, if they don't have it, you don't want it. It is high-end cocktails.
100%.
But it's a price you can – it's not cheap. But it's the epitome of baller on a budget. You're not compromising for the quality of the beverage or the service. A lot of those bartenders also work at some of the high-end bars. They pick up shifts at both locations. You're not going to compromise on your beverage or your service, but because you went to Fremont East, you are going to save a few bucks, and it's going to be a different vibe. I think Daphne's is shaping up to be the same thing. And the next time I'm downtown, once it's open, I will absolutely check that out.
And I will join you. One other place that I hope very much I will join you is at an A's game in Las Vegas. And we used to talk about this a lot. There hasn't been much news lately, but now there is. Both the Associated Press and the Las Vegas Review-Journal are reporting that the A's are actually on schedule for a June groundbreaking for their $1.75 billion stadium. That June groundbreaking would allow them to actually, in theory, we think probably play there in 2028, which I'm looking forward to. We know this week the architect shared some of the plans, and it's the same basic spherical armadillo thing that we've talked about before. But I'm super excited because for a while there were some real questions about whether this deal was going to move forward, and it looks to me like it actually is moving forward. John, are you confident that the A's actually wind up playing baseball in Las Vegas?
So I think this comes down to, I read so much content from Scott at Vital Vegas. There's a part of me that has doubts because Scott has been super vocal about this is never, ever, ever happening. But this seems to indicate that it is. And like you, I want it to happen. I want baseball in Vegas. I love to go to Vegas in the middle of the summer. And the idea of being able to plan around and say, oh, look, the Rangers are in town. I like the Texas Rangers. Let me show up in Vegas and stay at New York, or the Dirty Castle or Park MGM and be right there by the stadium and go have a great couple of days in Vegas, maybe catch 2 games. If it's a 3-game series, maybe be there for 2 of them. Yeah. I want this to happen. I really do. I do have doubts, mostly planted by Scott, but Scott's rarely wrong about Vegas, but nobody's right 100% of the time. And as much as I like the guy's content, I hope he's dead wrong. I want baseball in Vegas.
100%.
Well, on the Strip.
Yeah, absolutely on the Strip. One other story, and this feeds very much with my Leader in the Luxury Lounge sort of thing. The Las Vegas Review-Journal, the main local newspaper, is reporting that MGM is laying off. Actually, I think on Monday of this week they did lay off concierge staff at 6 resorts, at the MGM Grand, the Signature at MGM Grand, New York, Mandalay Bay, Park MGM, and Vdara. Now, they're not all together. MGM's not altogether getting rid of concierges. Aria, Bellagio, and Cosmo will keep theirs, and concierge calls from other MGM resorts will route to the Aria and Bellagio. And I get it. A lot of people are increasingly doing things electronically. You don't need a person to help you the same way that you might have 20 or 30 years ago, because you can do it electronically. But I also can't imagine that there were that many concierges to whom they were paying that much. This sounds to me like a penny wise, pound foolish sort of choice. John, is there anything in Las Vegas that you would actually use a concierge for?
The only time in my life I have ever used concierge service was that cruise where your family and my family split the presidential suite on the Liberty of the Seas. And our concierge, his name was Mangesh. My daughter is still salty that here we are 6 years later and she can't roll out of bed and ask Mangesh to arrange ice skating for her. That, to her, growing up in our household where we are definitely on a budget, having somebody at her beck and call who was delighted to do whatever her teenage heart wanted and make any experience happen was magical to her. For me, I'm not much on, I like to book my own stuff. I like to, you and I do a podcast because we enjoy planning the details of travel. So simply handing that over to a concierge, if I was a billionaire tomorrow, I like to plan my own stuff. The other thing I wanted to raise with this is this. How many people were using the concierge who aren't big enough gamblers to qualify for casino hosts or at least book things through the player's desk? Because I guess one of my questions for gambling resorts is, to some degree, don't you have some overlap between what casino host and the player's desk are trying to offer and what the concierge is trying to offer? And if a hotel needs to streamline operations, don't you want to kind of push people towards, if you want that level of service, gamble more? Now, I'm not saying that's not going to inconvenience some travelers, but I just wonder if that's the mentality. Hey, if you want this level of service, gamble, and we'll cater to you.
So, that actually is a really good point, because for the high-end, gamblers, essentially the high-end hotel guests who are most likely to make demands of a concierge, then they'll still already have one. But John, right, one of my favorite segments on this podcast, and we don't do it every episode, although we did it last time, we're going to do it today, is Vegas WTF. Vegas, what the fire? What is going on here? So John, what's going on in Vegas WTF news?
So, listeners, if you are still on X, Twitter, whatever Elon is calling it, and you have not abandoned the platform, and I will admit it is hard to stay on because I go on there for travel news, and it is very hard for the algorithm not to feed you America's very nasty political fighting. And don't get me wrong, Bill and I both have political opinions, and we talk politics with one another. But when we're working on the podcast, we want to focus on travel and sidestep all those headaches. That is hard to do on Twitter X. But if you're still on Twitter X, you need to follow Sin City Alerts. Caught this one the other day. Shoppers called in to, I guess, either building authorities or the police because there was a guest under a table at a shopping mall, I assume in a food court or dining venue, who was enjoying himself a little too up close, personal, and intimately while looking through his stack of showgirl cards that he had apparently gotten from the buskers out on the strip. It did not identify them all, but based on all this information and what we know about walking the strip, I'm guessing this is Miracle Mile where this kind of thing happened, because that's where you run into the most number of buskers passing out those cards. So, Bill, I know almost anything goes in Vegas, but WTF, man.
Yeah. No, keep your thing in your pants. I guess the other question I've got, John, is the last time you called a girl from one of those cards, was the girl on the card the one who showed up?
I have never and will never call one of those cards. We did cover the story last year about the elderly gentleman who got beaten up and had $10,000 stolen from him because he did call one of those cards. So I will say this. Bill and I do not endorse going to Vegas for adult activities. But if you're gonna, and the particular adult activity you want to engage in is not going to a club or a show where women undress, but you actually want to be up close and personal with one of these women, maybe leave Clark County and go to one of the surrounding counties where such activity is legal. Because if it's legal, it's regulated. And if it's regulated, you have legal protection. So I'm not going to judge you if that's what you're going to Vegas for. That is not what I'm going to Vegas for. But there are places where you're allowed to do such things. Don't call the phone number for the girl on the card. She probably doesn't look like that. And you're either going to get robbed or you're going to wake up in a bathtub full of ice with one or both of your kidneys gone. Either way, no, just don't.
I love that you think they are thoughtful enough to give you ice when they put you in the bathtub, John.
They just don't want the murder charge. It's not about you.
Fair.
Yeah. I mean, they're not going to have a manhunt over a kidney, but if somebody actually dies, then there's paperwork and,
You got to.
All right, Bill. Well, let's change gears before we close out the episode. You've got a trip coming up in May, and I know you want to share. We don't want to go through all the details because we're going to get into your reviews as content during late May and throughout the month of June. But why don't you give us a little bit of a preview? And I believe you have a question for our listeners.
So I am staying at several different hotels on this trip. Like I will stay in a hotel for one night, do a review of the room, some of the restaurants there, come back the next morning, talk about the experience. But I've got one last question because the prices are fairly similar and it's two different places I want to stay at. Red Rock Resort and Aria, not the Aria Sky Suites, but the regular Aria, are both options. And what I would really love to hear from our listeners is, which one would you be more interested in seeing some YouTube content about? So if you go to the Dine Drink Vegas YouTube channel, we've got a poll which should be up for another week or so that you can vote on. But I would love to hear from y'all about whether or not you would rather see some material on Red Rock or whether you would see some material on Aria. John, do you have if this was your trip, which one of those places would you be going to?
So I've stayed at Aria, I think 3 times now, and I know you've stayed at Sky Suites, and I got to go see your suite there. I love the Aria as a property, but because I've experienced it so many times, I really want to try more of the off-strip and off-Fremont properties, and Red Rock to me looks like a phenomenal place. I really would love to stay there myself. Now, it is way far away from everything else in Vegas, and I don't know that I would want to be there for 3 nights. I think it's a place where a night or 2 would be enough, but simply because neither of us have ever stayed there, I would gravitate towards Red Rock just for something different.
That's fair. Well, in other news off of our YouTube channels, so the Dine Drink Vegas YouTube channel had for the longest time been kind of a consolidated site, but I have split Dine Drink Vegas into 3 different YouTube channels. The main channel, Dine Drink Vegas, still does what it's always done, fairly short, full-length video reviews of places, but I had some YouTube Shorts up there, and that's now on a different channel, Dine Drink Vegas Shorts. And I used to upload this podcast on YouTube to the main YouTube channel, but that was seriously hampering the algorithm. Changed that 3 or 4 days ago. It's already helped the algorithm. If you're looking for this podcast, it's available wherever you get your podcast, but if you're looking for it on YouTube, it's available on Dine Drink Vegas podcast. And the one other note, and this isn't about the YouTube channel, but this is about this podcast. John and I ran the analytics on this a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, and it turns out we've got several dozen listeners in Ireland. So, folks in Ireland, if you're listening to this, thanks so much. Reach out to us at Dine Drink Travel on essentially any social media platform, or you can find John at Dine Drink John on X or Twitter or whatever Elon's calling it now. We would love to hear from y'all. We would love to hear what sort of content you want to hear, but it is a good chunk of our audience comes from Ireland. Probably because I've talked about it a few times, because I've got a child in college in Dublin. I'm going to have a child in college in Cork in just over a year. But thanks so much, folks, and we are glad you're along on this ride with us and listening.
Well, we do appreciate that you've been listening. To our Irish listeners, we say Shalante, and to everybody else, we simply say, if you have a friend that really enjoys Las Vegas content and would like to hear our podcast, or an enemy who hates listening to old fat white guys talk about just about anything, please share our podcast with them so we can continue to grow this and bring you more content. Remember to find us in all the places Bill has shared with you. We thank you so much for taking time to listen, and we wish you happy travels.